The year of elections is slowly but surely coming to an end, with Botswana, Mozambique and Namibia, as well as Mauritius, hosting their elections in this last quarter of 2024. By the end of this year, 19 African nations would have gone to the polls in what is known as a record-breaking year for elections. Warm greetings wherever you're finding yourself, and welcome to this election talk with me, Ndishisha Mfungu. We're coming to you from Swakopmund this evening. Now, election talk, at the heart, pardon me, of bringing these political events to the people is the media. And as African broadcasters meet for the 8th edition of the Broadcast and Digital Media Convention Africa 2024, which coincides with the 31st Annual General Meeting of the Southern African Broadcasting Association, we look at the year of elections through the lens of the media. And to help me with this, I'm joined by a very esteemed panel of experts, captains of this very industry. And first and foremost, on my immediate left, I'm joined by none other than Mr. Stanley Similo, who is the Director General of the Namibia Broadcasting Corporation and President of the Southern Africa Broadcasters Association. Very good day to you, or good evening to you once more. Good to see you. Thank you for being with us.
Good evening, Deshishi, and thank you for having me, and also good evening to your viewers.
And seated next to Mr. Similo is Benjamin Pius, who is the CEO of Broadcast Media Africa. He's here in the country as well to form part of this important convention. Mr. Pius, very good evening to you. Welcome to Namibia. Welcome to Election Talk.
Good evening, Nishishi.
Yep.
Good evening, viewers.
Fantastic. Of course, last but certainly not least, joining us virtually this evening is Ms. Nada Wotshela, who is the Group Executive for SABC Radio. Ms. Wotshela, good evening to you. Thank you so much for joining us here.
Good evening, Dishishi, and good evening to the panel, my fellow panel members, and also to your viewers.
Fantastic. I think it's only right that I start with the President of the Southern Africa Broadcasters Association. Of course, this being a very important year for the African continent, including Namibia as well, the year of elections. Help us understand the role of broadcasters in covering this important democratic exercise here.
Thanks, Nishishi. Look, elections, I think as a principle, are very important for democracies. It's through which where the electorate, after every 5 years, will then go and vote and decide who must lead them into the next 5 years in terms of how their life should be. Yeah. Now, when that extends to us as broadcasters, our job is very important, because through the journey of getting actually up to the level where people will vote, yeah, that is what we must transmit. We must do that fairly. We must do that openly, and we must be seen to be extremely transparent in terms of what we do. And at the same time, ensuring that all parties, irrespective of size, are seen, are heard, and have a say, so that their different constituencies, or those that they believe that they want to woo, can actually make informed decisions on their future.
Very much indeed. Ms. Wotshela, I think we're honored to have you in our midst this evening, as you're also just emerging from a very major election conducted in May. Just help us understand, the role of the SABC as a broadcaster in this important democratic exercise here.
Well, the SABC's role in the elections that we've just concluded in South Africa was a major one, being the biggest broadcaster in the country, having the biggest newsroom that covers every corner of South Africa in all the 12 official languages. We had to play a central role in getting the news about the elections to the people, ensuring that the people of South Africa are informed about, for example, the manifestos of each political party that was taking part in the elections. And we saw a new phenomenon this year where we also had independent candidates. So everybody had to be given a share of voice in our broadcast, so that citizens can make an informed decision. And I think that is very key to a healthy democracy, to ensure that the media is protected in being able, to do their work of informing the public, and making sure that as well that the reach, the news go out there. Voter education is still very important in South Africa. This year we had a lot of young people participating in the elections, and therefore they needed that education. They needed, to have free access to information and bringing the political parties and the politicians to our platforms to talk to people in the languages that they understand, breaking down their manifestos and so on. But what was also very, very important was our ability to hold the politicians accountable because politicians come every year, they make promises, and promises are not kept. So we had to hold them accountable and say, this is what you said in the previous election. It has not happened. What do people have to make out of that? So it was most important to hold the political parties that were participating accountable and also making sure that every South African has access to news about the elections.
Very much indeed. Of course, we'll get into the intricacies of that May election in a bit, but thank you for that overview, Ms. Wotshela. Mr. Pius, just looking at, of course, from the perspective of Broadcaster Media Africa, what do you make of the role of broadcasters in election coverage, and where are we as a continent right now?
Thank you. No, it's utmost important. Broadcasters, media practitioners, we stand in a place where we control the minds, or we have the ability to control what people are able to listen to watch. Now, we say in our industry that we have three functions: to inform, to educate, to entertain. When it comes to that supreme function that every individual in a civil society has to do, which is to elect the leader, and you do that via election, then if the media fails, then there is fire on the mountain, as we say. That is why the role of the media is crucial, not only to inform, but as Ms. Wotshela said, to educate the populace, to let them understand that when you are going into an election, when you are going to vote, it is of vital importance that you are well educated, not just about what Party A is going to do, but what Party B, C, and D are going to do. And that is why within the Broadcast Media Africa, with all our broadcasters within our network, it's vital that we pass on the information, and that's one of the things we're going to be doing here at this summit, to let leaders of our industry know how they must prepare themselves for that, like I said, very important function that we do in civil society, which is to vote and elect our leaders.
How do you reflect on the South African election that was conducted in May?
Listen, I'm not an expert in judging elections, but what I can tell you is, if you ask me, across the continent, how are things going in terms of elections? Now, the populace are getting wiser, smarter, and more knowledgeable. You must remember we live in the age where on the mobile phones you can get any information that you like. Regardless of whether it's South Africa, whether it's Namibia, Mozambique, Nigeria, the populace are getting more informed, smarter, and hence they're responding to what politicians are or are not doing, which then reflects into how they see themselves casting election. And then you can see that reflecting into individual jurisdictions, maybe the South African election that just happened. And Ms. Nada will be able to tell you more about that. But my opinion is the electorate has changed and is changing. And we in the media stands to straddle that opportunity to make sure that that change becomes a positive for our continent.
Yeah. Of course, Mr. Similo, as president of the Southern Africa Broadcasters Association, what do you make of where we are as a region right now? Of course, you oversee this association that sees a number of, 16 broadcasters fall under it. Where are we as a Southern African development community?
Yeah, I think from a public broadcasting perspective, I think the landscape has changed for the better. What we see today is that you have public broadcasters that are really living up to what needs to be happening in informing without fear or favor, making sure that whatever they see, they relay. Yes. And I personally always say that as broadcasters, we don't create news. We report on news. Yes. Now, if you do things that are bad, that will be reported. If you do things that are great, so will it be again. So on the accountability aspect, as was referred to by my two colleagues, that is where the thing starts. It would be that if I know I'm going to be running for elections, I need to come across credible. You need to be able to tell your story in whatever format that you would want to. And what we will be doing is to take that and give it to the viewers and listeners so that they can make an informed decision. But of course, where we are now, technology has changed to the extent that there are new ways now of getting involved in terms of what happens with the citizenry, what happens with constituencies. I mean, just the other day, the NBC launched TikTok on news. So this will be further platforms through which, in terms of news that is coming from Namibia, where people will be able to see what is happening and how these things are done. And also with our partner, Broadcast Media Africa, we're coming quite a long way. We are able these days to talk about new trends. We can analyze and say, what is this that we do which is not aligned with mainstream media that is happening there? And also the aspect where public broadcasters would be the only platforms through which people would obtain news, that is gone. Because the smartphone, through how technology has evolved, has become an extremely powerful tool in the hands of those that would want to be there. So the issue of starving people of information is a thing of the past. So reverting to what you were asking, I think we've done great. And I must say that I believe that we are proud of the work that we are doing. Of course, the aspect of what happens in a particular country around a particular matter, these are issues that we also leave in the hands of the respective CEOs with their broadcasters. But when we converge, we will always identify successes, challenges, and also look at new ways through which we can actually meander and find a way of getting past whatever might appear to be a challenge.
Absolutely. And one of those biggest challenges that broadcasters often on the African continent face are issues of financing. And I want to get the understanding from Saba, as far as financing of broadcasters on the continent is concerned.
Look, public broadcasters, when it gets to funding, there's a couple of issues that play in there. You will find countries that from a marketing perspective, they have the numbers. So if the aspect of saying that this is our product offering, we can put it into the market and the market responds commercially, such a public broadcaster may not see the need to have, for instance, shareholder, which in most cases is government to fund. But where those markets are relatively small, it then becomes a little bit of a challenge because now your dependency will be highly on what you get from whoever the shareholder might be. In this case, it would be government. So, and when the commerciality and the commercial viability thereof does not speak to what we would want to, then the challenges will be that your propensity would have to be that you must gravitate towards your shareholder and speak to the shareholder. And we know in politics, I carry a story today which is most probably positive, and then I'm the best broadcaster. But tomorrow I may just carry a story which may not necessarily be a bad one. But in terms of how it's perceived, that might have an influence as to how and how big your budget will be. Because the decision maker sits there. They might remember that on this day, this is how you covered me. So we are saying what would be important? Is it us fighting for democracy to be great? If it is the case, then fund the entities because they do have their own ways through which they can also be held accountable. Absolutely. And the viewer, the listener of today is wise. They can make up their mind. So there's no longer this thing where you can beat about the bush and try and build what I will call smoke and mirrors. No, absolutely not. People know exactly what they want. And we have seen how results of elections of late are panning out. But as a region, I think we have arrived.
We have arrived.
Yeah.
Very much indeed. Ms. Wotshela, please help us understand the SABC story as far as, challenges in financing and funding is concerned. How are you guys doing in that regard?
Look, the funding challenges of the SABC are well known, well documented, but we tried to navigate through them and became quite innovative around the election, using, for example, partnerships to get to certain research that we would like to use, even partnering with the IEC in our case to ensure that we have resources to bring, great election coverage to South Africans. The funding model of the SABC is one that is not ideal, and it gets discussed, widely in South Africa, whether it's in Parliament or in the public space. So we have to find other sources, to fund our operations, and of course, the bigger political parties would also, buy a lot of advertising around election period, and of course, not depriving the smaller parties of an opportunity, to have a voice. We have the ICASA, for example, making sure that, there is equitable coverage of elections. But issues of funding are really, really serious. Like I said, we had to try to be innovative and make sure that we make use of partnerships to get to certain resources that are vital for the election. This must have been actually, the most expensive election coverage because of the number of political parties that we had to cover, even the independents as the SABC. But because of the quality, I believe because of the quality of that coverage, we were also able to see revenues increasing. I mean, the revenues that we delivered in May and June of this year, they far outstrip same period from last year. So we managed to use that period to generate a lot of revenue for ourselves from the advertisers who were just seeing the robust discussions and gaining confidence in the work of the SABC, and also from the political parties themselves, and also from government.
Fantastic stuff. Hearing Ms. Wotshela talk about those innovative ways to overcome these limitations, Mr. Pius, perhaps you...
Yes, yeah. I echo what the panelists have said, and I want to emphasize something, Shishi. So, most of the broadcasters that you have, or if not all, have funding challenge. Who doesn't?
Yes.
Any organization that's in the commercial space that has to do things have funding challenges. And what you find is a lot of the broadcasters across our network are finding, like Ms. Wotshela said, new innovative ways to get themselves funded, yes, even around elections. I was speaking to one of the senior colleagues the other day, and they were thinking about something that I thought is quite innovative, which is crowdsourcing funding, which is getting the populace to contribute a rand, a dollar, a cent, or what have you, into the broadcasting organization, which doesn't tie them into any major political party or even the government of the day to have to give them funds. Apart from also reaching out to civil society partners. So our members in the Broadcast Media Africa network are actually looking at these ways in which they can get funding in for them to be able to do their work. Yes. Because again, the work that they are doing is God's work, because at the end of the day, if elections are not properly covered, yeah, if results of elections are not properly monitored by the media, if people are not educated, we will be in the Africa that we were 20 years ago. Funny enough, thankfully enough as well, that is not the Africa that we are in now. Sure. Things are a lot better, and I think we are going places, and the future bodes well for us in this continent.
Very much indeed. Mr. Similo, you, apart from being the president of the Southern Africa Broadcasters Association, you're also the Director General of the Namibian Broadcasting Corporation. Namibia will be going to the polls as well this November, the 27th of November to be exact. Talk to us about the NBC's approach to these elections and how you're dealing with some of these challenges, such as funding, for instance, here.
Yeah. Maybe the first thing to get to within the space of the upcoming elections, the NBC is now regulated by CRAM. Yes. And through that, there is a process through which we will have to follow in order to make sure that that equitable free airtime is there. And that came in, I think, about 2 years back. But the NBC already in 2014, we actually introduced a policy that sought to say that all parties will get equal free airtime. And then outside this, for those that would want to procure additional time, that would be open to that. So the regulation as it comes now plays into what we've been doing already. Yes. But as Ms. Wotshela was saying, when you look at countries that are as vast as Namibia and them, in our case, sparsely populated, you need to go to all areas and be seen to be covering this, all of it at a go. And at that particular time, everybody will be glued to TV, listening to radio, and of late online, wanting to know exactly what needs to happen. So the issue of funding then comes in via the aspect, do you have adequate resources? If they are not there, then your challenges are there. So what we've done from the NBC's perspective, we have submitted funding for this particular activity, which we hope that from a treasury perspective that it will be looked into positively. Incidentally, last week, we had a meeting with the Namibian Elections Commission where we're discussing some of the aspects also for us to understand what are the expectations, what will be coming. I think from the 16th of October, they will announce who has now gone through. Once that process starts, then the NBC's policy framework from editorial policy, style, the style guide, and also in terms of our own elections policy, linked to what the current regulations are. We will meet with all political parties and say, you must tell us now how many rallies do you have? Because we will have to equate that into what we will be able to do. On the basis of that, we will then inform and say, all parties, we will cover, and this is just an example, maybe 5 rallies. You choose where they would want to be, and we will do your inserts for messaging that must run daily on radio and all of that. And then anything outside that, we will do on a commercial basis so that at least we can also generate some form of funding us as well. So our teams are ready for that. We have been discussing, the plans are there. We're just waiting to hear now what's going to be coming from there. But elections, as both Benjamin here and Ms. Wotshela has said, it's expensive for broadcasters. Yep. But at the same time, we need to be there. But at the end of the day, the question that would need to be asked is that, what is the real price of democracy? True. It is definitely not. We put a price tag on it. Well, it's definitely not cheap. It's definitely not cheap.
Quickly, just to buttress what the chief has said, when there is soccer, say FIFA or CAF, one way or the other, the government or the policymaker finds a way to find the dollar to pay to get these rights so they can show the populace. The same thing needs to apply to elections, if not more. Because elections, elections. Exactly.
Ms. Wotshela, I want to ask you a question around sustainability. Hearing you say earlier, you've seen increments in your revenues for the months of May and June. Obviously, elections come every 5 years. How do we create sustainability around these increments in revenues? I'm sure the SABC is exploring those options here.
Look, sustainability is that buzzword that is in every document, every strategy, that you would find in the SABC. The reality is that advertising budgets are shrinking, and for a public broadcaster like the SABC to be 85% dependent on advertising, it means that somewhere, somehow, there are things that are gonna have to fall by the wayside while you are busy chasing revenue and sustainability. But we have found that it's very, very important to work with all the stakeholders in trying to achieve the sustainability of a public broadcaster. It's a known fact that a public broadcaster, or maybe a portion of it, which we term public value, the public value content, like the elections content, like educational content, if at least, we were to be guaranteed by government that, that part of our mandate is going to be covered, or it has a budget that is set aside. But to have to run a public broadcaster with commercial funds, 85%, SABC is funded 85% through commercial funds, because even the TV license revenue that we get, from the citizens is just not enough, to run the SABC. It sits at around 10% right now, and then we get about 5% from government for certain projects. So if we were to have guaranteed funds for public value content or for the public mandate, it would make our jobs quite easy. It would ensure that, we reach every citizen with critical content, like elections content, like news, like educational content. But we have to be innovative. We have to look at alternative revenue streams to ensure that as a public broadcaster, we remain sustainable.
Absolutely. There's often this connotation or attachment towards funding, especially from a state side, and perhaps, broadcasters leaning towards that particular governing body or party, so to say. Mr. Pius, I'm sure, you've come across this as a network. I'm sure you deal with this as a network as well. Help us understand how tricky this is and how broadcasters can manage that.
So there is this saying, as you said, he who pays the piper dictates the tune. No, but it's a serious thing, because at the end of the day, broadcasters are professionals. These guys are consummate professionals. They want to do right by their profession. They want to do right. It's like the medical doctor and the oath that they take.
Yes.
Same thing with the broadcasters. They want to make sure that they report the news as they see it. Now, this goes directly to the policymakers. If we carry on trying to impress on broadcasters, to lean on them because we pay them to go a certain way, we are only harming ourselves. It's self-harm.
Democracy.
Exactly. Democracy is at stake. The second thing is the broadcasters loses trust of the public. Yes. Then they start looking towards external sources of news. Dara mentioned the names of all those big networks that doesn't have the interest of Africa, of your country at heart. Then where are we in this space? So what we've done and the research we've done is that the broadcasters want to do their job. Yes. If funding is coming from the states, and the state wants to then use that opportunity to lean on the broadcaster, then the state must look at itself, or the people that are running the state must look at itself and say, we've been doing this for almost 50 years. It hasn't led us anywhere. Is it not the time to change? Let these guys, give them what they need to run, and let them run with it, but call them to account. Ghana Broadcasting Corporation has done something fantastic. They've encouraged it in law that the money that is coming, it's a bit like you are paying the judiciary, it's coming straight from the treasury. It's not coming from the presidency. Yes. So those are the kind of things that might be looked into. It's easier said than done, but we are encouraging our members to keep going and keep doing the best they can within the constraints that state financing provides them.
Absolutely. Mr. Similo, how do we deal with these perceptions, these connotations, and of course maintaining journalistic integrity as state broadcasters here?
Well, I think in the main it would all depend on the offering that you are giving. Yep. If you are public funded and your offering is as such that it is suspect, naturally people will have views that will seek to say you are actually dancing to the tune, as Benjamin was saying here. However, if you do what you know that from a professional and ethical journalism perspective, you know it is right, you should be able to stand up to that and say that, but look, this is our profession, this is what we want to do. If we can't practice what we're good at, then where will it be? I, for one, at NBC, I have the view as DG that says that, look, in terms of the NBC, we will ridicule nobody, irrespective of who they are and what their rank in life is. And we will ensure that everybody gets a right to reply, because those are the tenets of just being fair in life that will ensure that we do things the right way. And equally, we will not easily run stories, for instance, that do not give a right to reply to a party that might be affected. At the time when we will have to do that, there will have to be a reason, but we will take whatever measurable step it is in order to ensure that we get the other person to respond as well. Because the right to reply for us, it's important. Yes. Now, if you don't do those things, that's when then people will start questioning your credibility as an entity. And one of the things that you will find, which is in a lot of cases small talk, and this is where public broadcasters go wrong. You will have people just saying things about, no, the SABC or the NBC is like this, and we never rebut that. And that, for us, from our point, I think it's a nonsensical position that we're taking. That's why you would have seen we are going out now and stating our case. We are representing ourselves as public broadcasters in the fashion that we would want to be seen. And not just saying that. We are living up to what we need to do by also respecting what we believe our viewers, listeners, and onliners must have. But we will also listen when they criticize. We will not say don't criticize us, but we will also have the view to ask, is this fair, or is it just criticism for the sake of criticism? And I, for one, I encourage views that are different from what we do, because it's through that through which we can actually grow and become better broadcasters.
Before I move on to our next topic, which is, of course, artificial intelligence, this convention also speaks to that. I'd just like to get Ms. Wotshela's view on this matter. Receiving 85% of your funding from the state, it's easy for people to conclude and say, listen, I think the SABC may be a bit biased and maybe, in support of the ruling government. Talk to us about how you deal with that on a day-to-day basis here.
No, you got it wrong. 85% of the SABC's revenue is from advertising.
Okay, apologies for that, yes.
Yeah. So it's 85% is from advertising. We get about 5% from the state. And we have been advocating for an increase in the budget specifically for the public mandate. You cannot say, or you cannot, set up rules and policies that say, okay, SABC should do this, should deliver so many hours per day of children's education. You must deliver so many hours per day of sport, of religion, of local music content, and so on. And then on the one hand, not provide an environment, that is conducive for the public broadcaster to produce those things. So what is happening now, you're taking money from commercial revenue to fund things that enrich people's lives. We're not saying there's anything wrong with enriching people's lives, but we're saying this mandate should be shared. The state is there, to ensure that people's lives, are enriched, people are alleviated from poverty, people are educated, literacy levels are increased, and so on. We believe it's an intertwined mandate that we should be sharing the responsibility of. We don't mind using our commercial radio stations and television platforms, to get to the commercial revenues and cross-subsidizing, one another. But what has happened is that now there is an over-reliance in the SABC on commercial revenue. You have a radio station like Ukhozi, for example, 7.5 million listeners, and it delivers on the public mandate better than any other. But there's an over-reliance on Ukhozi, for example, to subsidize the other smaller brands, because the station is that big and that powerful that it is able to deliver, close to 400 million rands worth of revenue per annum. So what we're saying no to is the over-reliance on commercial revenue to fund the public mandate. We're saying it's a responsibility that must be shared. But I also want to lay on what my colleague there, Mr. Similo, was saying about public broadcasters not being able to tell their stories. It's very, very true. And that is something that we normally discuss in our meetings and share with our staff. But you know, the problem there is the marketing, because our commercial counterparts, our competitors, they have so little, you know, of the public value to deliver, and they use a lot of, you know, their airtime to promote their activities and promote themselves, which is something that we don't do, because we have all these other, you know, things to deliver on that are in line with the public mandate.
Absolutely.
So we don't have the kinds of marketing budgets to go out there and say, actually, this is the truth about the SABC. Right now, South Africans will tell you that, you know, the other broadcasters are bigger and more credible
Very much, Ms.
than the
Wotshela.
SABC.
Yeah.
But if you go to the barometers that measure credibility,
Of course, we'll connect to Ms. Wotshela in a bit. Ms. Nada Wotshela, the Group Executive of SABC Radio, you're speaking to us there as well. The theme for this 8th edition of the Broadcast and Digital Media Convention Africa 2024 is, of course, around broadcasting and content publishing in the AI-infused digital ecosystem. Artificial intelligence is slowly but surely creeping into our newsrooms. I'd like to get your views as editors-in-chiefs, as networks. What do you make of AI?
I just want to get to a small point that I just want to put into context. When you hear Ms. Wotshela saying that 85% they generate via advertising.
And 400 million.
Yes, now I need to put context to that, because I already can hear Namibians saying, but why can't the NBC do that? Here's the answer is very simple. 60 million people, 3 million people.
Yep.
You make the number, you get to your
Absolutely.
to your response. I just needed to put that out there.
400 million from a radio
No, I was
station.
worried now, because the next
that
thing
could be
is
the
that
expectation for
I
you.
think my WhatsApps are already running saying, but DG, these people are making
You could do more.
85%, yeah. So market size matters. 60 million, 3 million people. Yeah, so I just needed to put
Very
that.
much indeed. Let's talk about artificial intelligence and, of course, it making its way into our newsrooms.
It's here, my brother. It is here. It is here. It is part of what we do. Earlier on, I was speaking to the head of news within our own newsroom, asking Mr. Peter Dang, Peter, just give me an idea. Have we started using and infusing AI? He said, yes, DG, we most probably at about 7-10%. But that we do only to try and look at aesthetics in terms of what we need to put out. The rest of everything else that is there is still managed by people. We are doing it. But the point is that the pace at which AI is coming into our lives, not just in broadcasting, is so fast that if we don't discuss it like we're going to be starting tomorrow, we will be left behind. And that's an element that we cannot. So I'm looking forward to the discussions, because through Benjamin, we have BMA, we have a lot of experts that who will be here. They will come and talk about things. We will share experiences. Others will come and raise whatever they believe have been challenges. So I think the stage as of tomorrow is set in order for us to fully appreciate and understand what the future holds when we look at what artificial intelligence today offers, particularly for broadcasting.
Very much indeed. Do you foresee any major challenges in its adoption? Do you foresee any major challenges to the very fabric of journalism?
Well, you see, the test will be around how authentic are you? And people will not be fooled. If you're going to do things that you have not created, they will know.
Yes.
But the point again is that it is there, it can make your life
Easier?
easier. Then it will be a matter of, will you use it, or will you remain with the archaic ways of doing things? So for us, we will have to keep quite a fixed eye on how we want this thing to transition, particularly within our newsroom setup, because there you cannot afford to have any form of reporting that would seek to suggest that whatever you're putting out is not authentic. Even though we're going to be applying it, it will have to work. I mean, just last week, middle of last week, there was a conference here in Namibia where newsrooms were saying, no, look, we are already applying. In fact, some guys were actually showing AI-generated presenters.
I saw.
And your job is in trouble. And these guys are reading the news as if they are real people.
Weather forecasts, everything.
You understand. So these are some of the things that we will be looking at. We will have to understand the pros and cons.
Yes.
Are you going to apply to the detriment of taking people out of their jobs, or would you rather to bring it on board so that we can complement whatever you do, so that you can improve on your offering? I think the latter for me is what speaks, and that is what we would want to see.
Mr. Pius, I see you nodding as well in
No,
agreement.
I couldn't agree more with what the chief is saying. And I have to tell you, my friend, whether we like it or not, it's here, as the chief said. It's here and it ain't going anywhere. Now, question is, will broadcasters position themselves and get themselves ready to be able to take the best of AI and remove the worst of AI? Because as in everything else, it's a technology. It's got a very good value. For example, we're sitting here, we're speaking in English. If you tell me, how many languages do you have in Namibia?
We have 11 languages.
11. Now, consider a situation where, as
13 languages, 11, yes.
13 languages. As we are sitting here speaking, I'm talking in English. Now, across all the populace in Namibia, in the different languages, automatically, without any human intervention, my voice is coming out in their language. And that is the power of AI. So that is a good thing. Another good thing is the fact that maybe in 5 years' time, I will be getting interviewed by an AI machine. Maybe that's not a good thing for you. No, I'm joking. No, that is a bad thing.
Is it even real?
Yeah, exactly.
I'm very real.
No, that is what we are saying. Now, when you then look at it, how do you, as media organization, because when you go to all these media shows, like I was in Amsterdam the other day and before that in Las Vegas, they will show you, and like the chief was saying, they will show you what AI can do and it blows your mind. And then you're thinking to yourself, if we take this back home and we start to implement it and a newsroom of 50 people becomes 2, what happens to the 48?
That is a big question.
That is one of the things we need to start looking at. And if we don't start looking at it now, we can't manage it. So
it's finding that balance.
It is.
And with the funding challenges that you have, at the point, these would be considerations that will be live on the table, and so on. But it's finding the balance so that you don't lose the humanity within what you do, because the human aspect has to be there.
There's often this perception that Africa is often forced to go along with certain things, certain agendas, etc. Be it, the fourth industrial revolution, where you find some people arguing that, yeah, but we haven't gone through the other revolutions, properly, so to say. Is the African newsroom truly ready for artificial intelligence, or is it something that we're simply going with because the world is going with it?
Well, the other revolutions in between, if they couldn't be there, you will be forced to jump them. Because if you're going to be starting here now, by the time you get to where you thought it was, others will be gone. They will be moving at the speed of whatever.
So there is generative AI right now, you know it, ChatGPT and all the likes. And if, for example, you're saying that in the newsroom before you're trying to get some facts and gather some news, and you have to do a lot of research on the internet or desktop research and so on and so forth to back what you're doing in the field, generative AI can compress that for you now into a short span. Now, the question is, you still, like the chief said, you still need to have the human interface to make sure that it is human what we are sending to people. To your question, I think we in Africa actually stand a better chance to take advantage of this if we are open to it, because we are not coming up with legacy mindset. That is why across the world, people will tell you that the mobile phone, what they call the cell phone in the United States, the mobile phone revolution really took off in Africa because there was this legacy landline mindset. Same thing with these things that's coming. But the newsroom, you ask whether they are ready for it. I tell you, ready or not, here I come. That is what's going to happen.
Very much
They
indeed.
have to be ready.
Very much indeed. As we reach the end of our conversation, what would you like to see from African broadcasters following what has been a very active, year of elections? Of course, we still have a number of elections. Mozambique itself is going to the polls this Wednesday, the 9th. We have, at the end of this month, Botswana going to the polls as well. We have Namibia. We have Ghana going to the polls on the 7th of December as well. What do you make of this year of elections and how it will shape the way going forward and how broadcasters cover elections here?
It's a good thing. It's a period of renewal. It's a period of us asking the people that we've put in places, what have you done for me lately, and what are you going to do for me tomorrow? And the questions are being asked intelligently, coherently, and cogently. As broadcasters, go back to what I said earlier on. We believe within the Broadcast Media Africa networks, the broadcasters that we interface with across the continent, these are professionals. These are people that want to do their job. They want to go out there and bring the news and report the news back to their viewers and listeners. Yeah. And long may that continue. So we see positivity. We see things happening with the aid of technology. Yes. And the fact that audiences now are much more refined and more attuned to finding, getting things elsewhere that you can give to them if they're not happy with you to go elsewhere. We see that all those that are coming together and helping the broadcasters in Africa to know that their game now is raised, and they can get there. It's happy days ahead, my friend. Happy days ahead.
Fantastic stuff. Mr. Similo, also just touching on this 8th convention and, of course, what you hope to be some of the key outcomes from this convention, but also looking at the bigger task ahead for the NBC come the 27th of November.
Yeah, look for us as SABA and BMA. We want almost like getting a new lease on life. Yeah. Because if we leave here on Thursday, we definitely should not go back to what we did before we came. Otherwise, then the whole exercise would have been futile. There has to be one or two things that we need to bring to the fore that we can infuse into what we do. And I've always maintained that anything that you've learned, if you don't go and practice it, you're likely to forget it. So for us, and particularly from a SABA perspective, the idea would be that each and every one who is within our conglomerate is that we will have to take what works for our organizations and then start running with that. And where we find that we potentially have synergies, so will we speak around that as well. So yes, we're looking forward. As for the elections, I think we are as ready as can be. As I just said last week, we had quite a lengthy session with the ECN, which is managing elections, where we were speaking to them, and also us trying to comprehend how far they are with the processes, what they want to do. So our state of readiness is there, but we're also hoping that in the Namibian case, that Hashimi is hopefully also tuned in, and I think most probably working with his calculator, and yes, and then we'll take it from there. Otherwise, our ability then to cover the elections at the level that we believe we should might be retarded.
Gentlemen, it's been a true honor, a great pleasure being in your company and having this conversation. Thank you for being with us and sharing your expertise. We wish you all the best with this convention in the 31st SABA AGM. Wish you all the best for the elections and, of course, all the work with the network. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
There you have it. That was Benjamin Pius, the CEO of Broadcast and Media Africa. Of course, also joined there by the Director General of the Namibian Broadcasting Corporation and President of the Southern Africa Broadcasters Association. That's Stanley Similo. Of course, unpacking broadcasters and election coverage as we continue our election talk series right here on the NBC. Do catch us next Monday, same time, same channel, as we continue to unpack all things elections related. From myself and Ndishisha Mfungo and the entire men and women tasked with putting the show together, coming to you from Swakopmund, we wish you a pleasant evening and pleasant viewing ahead.